Nero Wolfe and the Witch of Greenwich Village. It was a Wednesday morning in late April, and spring had finally decided to stop teasing New York City and actually show up for work. The temperature had climbed to a comfortable 67 degrees by 9:30, which meant Nero Wolfe was upstairs in his plant rooms communing with his orchids. Fritz Brenner was in the kitchen preparing something that smelled like it might require its own postal code, and I was at my desk in the office trying to make sense of a 3-week-old expense report that included entries like informant, $12, and miscellaneous $47, neither of which I could remember with any clarity. The brownstone at 9118 West 35th Street was settling into its morning routine with the precision of a Swiss watch. Through the bulletproof windows, installed 2 years ago, after that unpleasant business with the Jersey Syndicate, I could see the usual traffic, a delivery truck idling at the corner, 2 women with shopping bags heading toward 9th Avenue, a taxi prowling for fares. Normal, ordinary. The kind of peaceful morning that makes a man forget that the world is full of people who do terrible things to each other for terrible reasons. From the kitchen came the sound of claws on tile. The morning patrol was underway. Caesar appeared first, his massive Doberman frame filling the hallway as he made his rounds with the gravitas of a general inspecting troops. At 95 pounds of glossy black and rust muscle, Caesar didn't need to hurry. His presence alone was enough to make most people reconsider their life choices. Behind him came Mars, only slightly smaller but twice as aggressive, followed by Apollo with his red coat and restless energy. The 3 males moved through the ground floor like a well-oiled machine, checking doors, investigating corners, making sure the fortress was secure. In the kitchen, I knew Minerva would be watching from her preferred spot near the service entrance, her intelligent eyes tracking everything with the patience of a chess player. Diana, the smallest and fastest of the 5 Dobermans, was probably already in the front hall, her sharp ears tuned to the street sounds. And Loyal, our brick-red pit bull with the white blaze down his chest and the notched ear, would be stationed near the front door, his 45 pounds of courage and devotion ready to die for anyone in this house. Loyal had earned his place here 2 years ago by walking nearly 200 miles from the woods of upstate New York to this exact address, carrying a plea for help from his murdered owner. Jonathan Blackwood had been a reclusive author, a man who'd written admiringly about Nero Wolfe without ever meeting him. When Blackwood knew he was in danger, he'd sent Loyal away with a message scratched on his collar tag, "Help." The dog had walked for days through forests, across rivers, past countless towns, until he found 918 West 35th Street. We'd solved Blackwood's murder, brought his killer to justice, and Loyal had stayed. Fritz had made him a leather collar with Loyal tooled into it and a brass plate engraved with our address. The 5 Dobermans had accepted him immediately, recognizing a fellow guardian. Now he was as much a part of the brownstone as the bulletproof glass or Fritz's cooking. I was just writing Ask Wolfe about $47 in the margin of the expense report when the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, but I was already up and moving, through the one-way glass panel in the front door, another security feature that Wolfe had installed after deciding that knowing who wanted to kill you before you opened the door was a reasonable precaution. I could see a man standing on the stoop. He was in his middle 40s, thin and aesthetic looking, with the kind of face you see in paintings of medieval saints. He wore a charcoal suit that had cost at least $200, a wine-colored tie with a silver pin, and an expression that suggested he'd recently learned something that had rearranged his understanding of the universe. His hands were shaking. I opened the door. Caesar materialized beside me, his massive head level with my hip, and fixed the visitor with a stare that could have frozen vodka. The man on the stoop took an involuntary step backward. "Easy, Caesar," I said. "He doesn't look dangerous. Terrified maybe, but not dangerous." To the visitor, "Can I help you?" Yes, I hope so." His voice was cultured, with a faint Boston accent trying to maintain its composure. "My name is Jasper Kimball. I own an art gallery in Greenwich Village. I was told that Mr. Nero Wolfe is a private investigator, and I need help. I need someone who can—" He stopped, took a breath, tried again. "Someone was murdered. The police think it was a robbery, but I know it wasn't. It was her, the witch, and I think I might be next." I've heard a lot of opening gambits in my years as Nero Wolfe's assistant, but this one had the virtue of novelty. I glanced at Caesar, who was still conducting his threat assessment with the thoroughness of a Treasury agent examining counterfeit bills, then back at Kimball. Mr. Wolfe is with his orchids until 11 o'clock, I said. He doesn't like being disturbed during his plant time, unless someone is actually dying. Are you actively dying, Mr. Kimball? No. But then you can wait. Come in, have a seat in the office, and I'll take your preliminary information. If Mr. Wolfe decides to see you, you'll know at 11. If he doesn't, I'll explain why and show you the door. Fair enough? Kimball nodded, and I stepped aside to let him enter. Caesar maintained his position, forcing Kimball to edge past him carefully, and I saw Loyal appear at the end of the hall, his sharp eyes fixed on our visitor with that particular intensity he reserves for people who might mean harm. The dog had walked 200 miles to bring justice for a murdered man. He took security seriously. I led Kimball down the hall to the office and gestured to the red leather chair nearest my desk. As he sat, I noticed Mars and Apollo had taken up positions in the hallway, visible through the office door, a subtle reminder that this brownstone had more security than most banks. Minerva appeared a moment later, moving with her characteristic deliberation, and settled near the door to the front room. She liked to observe new people from a distance, gathering data before making judgments. "Can I get you anything?" I asked, settling into my desk chair. "Coffee? Water? A shot of brandy to steady the nerves?" "No, thank you. He looked around the office, taking in the walls lined with bookshelves, the massive globe in the corner, the safe that held Wolfe's most valuable possessions, the bulletproof windows that looked like ordinary glass, unless you knew what to look for. "This is where he works? Where he solves murders?" "This is where he thinks," I corrected. "I'm the one who does the actual work. The legwork, the interviews, the dodging of bullets. Mr. Wolfe solves murders from that chair behind the desk, which he'll occupy in exactly—" I checked my watch, 43 minutes. "In the meantime, you can tell me your story. I'll take notes, ask questions, and decide whether this is something Mr. Wolfe would be interested in. Start with the witch. That's the hook, right? Someone you call a witch, and someone who's dead." Kimball's hands gripped the arms of the chair. "Her name is Delphine Mercier. She's lived in Greenwich Village for about 3 years, and I don't know what to call her, a fortune teller, a mystic, a fraud. She holds gatherings at her apartment on Bleecker Street, salons she calls them. People come to hear her talk about fate and destiny and the hidden patterns in their lives. She reads cards, she interprets dreams, she tells people things about themselves that she shouldn't be able to know." "Shouldn't be able to know, or doesn't know?" I asked. "There's a difference. Most fortune tellers are just good at reading people. Body language, clothing, casual remarks that reveal more than intended. It's a skill, not magic." "I know that. I'm not a fool, Mr. Goodwin. I've been around artists and performers my whole adult life. I know how people manipulate perception. But Delphine," he paused, searching for words. "She's different. She knows things, specific things, private things, things that no amount of observation or clever guessing could explain." I made a note on my pad. Such as, 2 months ago, she told one of my artists, a painter named Rebecca Hartley, that her brother was in financial trouble and would come to her for money within the week. Rebecca's brother lives in Philadelphia. She hadn't mentioned him to anyone in the village. 3 days later, he showed up at her studio asking to borrow $500. He'd lost his job and was behind on his rent. "Could have been a lucky guess," I suggested. "Brothers borrowing money isn't exactly rare." "Then explain this." She told a jazz musician named Thomas Crane that his wife was having an affair with his best friend, and that he would discover it when he found a silver cigarette case with initials that weren't his. 2 weeks later, he found exactly that. A cigarette case engraved with the initials RM, which happened to be the initials of Raymond Marsh, his trumpet player and oldest friend. Thomas confronted them both. Raymond admitted everything. I wrote that down too, though I kept my skepticism visible. Private investigator with good surveillance skills could have discovered the affair and fed the information to your witch, or the wife could have told someone, who told someone else, who told Delphine. Information travels fast in small communities. "I thought the same thing," Kimball said, "until she made a prediction about Martin Fels. And Martin Fels is the one who's dead." "Yes," his voice dropped. "Martin was a painter. Brilliant, difficult, temperamental, everything you'd expect from a real artist. He'd been showing at my gallery for 5 years. His work was starting to attract serious attention from collectors. 3 weeks ago, he attended one of Delphine's gatherings. I was there too. She singled him out in front of everyone, about 20 people, and told him that death was walking beside him. I looked up from my notes. Those exact words? Close enough, she said. Martin Fels, you walk with a shadow that is not your own. Death walks beside you, drawn by greed and desire. You will be found alone, with something precious in your hands, and that precious thing will be your undoing. Before the moon is full again, your blood will stain the floor of your sanctuary. He recited it like a memorized prayer, each word precise. Everyone heard it, everyone remembered it. And last Friday night, Martin was found dead in his studio, his sanctuary, as she called it. He'd been struck on the head with a heavy sculpture stand. His wallet was missing, and so was a painting he'd just completed, a portrait worth at least $5,000. I felt the first stirring of genuine interest. $5,000 was serious money, more than most people earned in 2 years. Who found him? His landlord. Martin rented a studio on the 3rd floor of a building on Cornelia Street. The landlord, a man named Eugene Walsh, went up to collect the rent Saturday morning and found the door unlocked. Martin was on the floor near his easel. He'd been dead for at least 8 hours, according to the police. What did the police say? That it was obviously a robbery that went wrong. Someone broke in to steal the painting. Martin surprised them. They hit him with the nearest object and fled. Case closed, more or less. They interviewed a few neighbors, didn't find any witnesses, and that was that. Detective in charge, a man named Rowcliffe, told me they'd keep the case open, but that without witnesses or physical evidence, there wasn't much they could do. He leaned forward, and I could see the fear in his eyes now, naked and undisguised. But don't you see? It happened exactly as Delphine predicted. Martin was alone. He had something precious, the painting, and it led to his death. In his studio, his sanctuary, and now he's dead. You think the witch killed him? No. Yes. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its careful arrangement. I think someone who heard that prediction decided to make it come true. I think someone in Greenwich Village killed Martin Fels and made it look like a robbery, and everyone will believe it was random chance because Delphine had already predicted it. The perfect cover for murder. That was actually a clever theory, and I made a note to tell Wolfe about it. Any idea who would want Martin Fels dead? That's just it. I can think of several people. Martin wasn't an easy man. He'd borrowed money from other artists and never paid it back. He'd stolen 2 girlfriends from rivals. He'd insulted critics who could have helped his career. He'd had a screaming argument with a collector who accused him of selling a fake. Martin made enemies the way other people make conversation. But without proof, without evidence, he trailed off helplessly. And now you're worried you might be next, I said. Because the witch made a prediction about you too. His face went pale. Yes, 2 weeks ago, at another gathering. She looked at me in front of everyone and said, he swallowed hard. She said, Jasper Kimball, you will betray someone you love, and that betrayal will cost you everything. Your reputation, your livelihood, your future, all will crumble because you chose profit over loyalty. Everyone heard it, everyone, and now they look at me differently. They wonder what I've done, or what I'm going to do. My artists, my clients, my friends, everyone is waiting for me to betray someone. And after what happened to Martin, he stopped, composing himself. If someone decided to act on Martin's prediction, what's to stop them from acting on mine? I looked at him for a long moment, evaluating. The fear was genuine. The story was strange enough to be either completely true or completely fabricated, and after 7 years of working for Nero Wolfe, I'd learned that the truth was usually stranger than anything you could invent. The sound of the elevator descending interrupted my thoughts, a faint mechanical hum that meant Wolfe was coming down from his morning session with the orchids. I glanced at my watch. Exactly 11 o'clock. The man ran on a schedule that would have made railroad engineers weep with envy. That's Mr. Wolfe, I told Kimball. I'm going to present your case to him. He'll decide whether he's interested. Be prepared to answer questions, and be prepared for him to say no. He turns down more cases than he accepts, and he has a particular aversion to anything involving superstition or supernatural nonsense. I don't believe in the supernatural, Kimball said quickly. I believe in murder. Then you and Mr. Wolfe will get along fine. The elevator came to rest, and the door opened. Nero Wolfe emerged with his characteristic deliberation, a seventh of a ton of organized intelligence, moving at his own pace, and no one else's. He wore a yellow shirt that would have looked ridiculous on any other human being, a brown tie with a pattern that suggested someone had spilled soup on silk, and an expression that indicated he'd spent 2 hours in paradise and now had to deal with mortal tedium. Behind me, I heard Caesar shift position. The dog knew Wolfe's schedule as well as anyone in the house, and I saw Loyal's ears prick up from his position near the door. The 6 guardians had learned long ago that when Wolfe descended at 11, it meant the day's real work was about to begin. Wolfe circled behind his desk, lowered himself into the custom-built chair that was the only piece of furniture in Manhattan capable of supporting him comfortably, and looked at me. He didn't glance at Kimball. He never looked at potential clients before hearing my preliminary report. It was a technique designed to make them feel like supplicants seeking an audience with royalty, and it worked. "Archie?" "Mr. Jasper Kimball," I said, consulting my notes. "Age approximately 45, owner of the Kimball Galleries on MacDougall Street in Greenwich Village, specializing in contemporary American painters. One of his artists, a man named Martin Fels, was murdered last Friday night in his studio on Cornelia Street. The police believe it was a robbery. Someone broke in to steal a valuable painting. Fels surprised them. They killed him and took the painting, worth about $5,000. Wolfe's eyes had opened fully now, which meant I had his attention. $5,000 was the kind of number that made even a rich man pay attention. "Mr. Kimball believes the police are wrong," I continued. "He thinks the murder was planned and executed by someone in Greenwich Village, and that the robbery angle is a cover story. His evidence is interesting. 3 weeks ago, a woman named Delphine Mercier, who calls herself a mystic and holds gatherings where she makes predictions, told Martin Fels, in front of 20 witnesses, that he would die alone in his studio with something precious in his hands, and that greed would be his undoing. She predicted, essentially, exactly what happened." "Coincidence," Wolfe said. "It wasn't a question." "That's what I thought," I agreed. "But Mr. Kimball points out that if someone who heard that prediction decided to make it come true, they'd have the perfect cover. Everyone would assume it was fate or coincidence, and the police would treat it as a random robbery. Clever, if true." "And Mr. Kimball's interest in this matter?" "2 reasons. First, Martin Fels was his friend and his artist. He wants justice. Second, and this is where it gets personal, this Delphine Mercier made a prediction about Mr. Kimball too. Something about betraying someone he loves and losing everything. He's worried that if someone killed Fels to fulfill a prediction, they might come after him next." Wolfe grunted, which could have meant anything from fascinating to preposterous. He shifted his gaze to Kimball for the first time, and I saw our visitor straighten slightly in his chair, the automatic response to being examined by a man who could read character the way other people read newspapers. "Mr. Kimball," Wolfe said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from somewhere around his ankles. "Do you believe in fortune-telling?" "No, sir." "Do you believe this woman, Delphine Mercier, possesses supernatural powers?" "No, sir. I believe she's exceptionally perceptive, possibly with access to private information, but not supernatural." "Then why do you care about her predictions?" Kimball took a breath. "Because other people believe in them. Because she has influence in Greenwich Village. Because when she makes a prediction, people remember it, and if something happens that seems to fulfill it, they assume she was right. That's power, Mr. Wolfe. The power to shape perception. And if someone is using that power to commit murder and make it look like fate," he spread his hands, "that's why I'm here." Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment, and I knew he was weighing the variables: money, effort, likelihood of success. The satisfying intellectual challenge of exposing a murderer who thought they were clever. The annoyance of dealing with artistic types in Greenwich Village. The necessity of sending me into the field to do actual work while he remained in the brownstone. "My retainer is $10,000, he said finally, opening his eyes. "My daily rate is $500 plus expenses. If I recover property, I expect a percentage. If I expose a murderer and you are subsequently called to testify, you will do so without complaint. If I determine that you yourself are complicit in this death, I will turn my findings over to the police regardless of payment. Archie, the contract." I already had it out, sliding it across the desk to Kimball, along with a pen. "Sign at the bottom, date it, initial the rider clauses on page 2. Kimball didn't hesitate. He signed with the quick movements of a man who'd made up his mind before walking in the door, then pulled out a checkbook and wrote a check for $10,000. I watched his hand move across the paper. Steady now, no shaking, and felt a small surge of satisfaction. Whatever else happened, we were on a case. The brownstones' expenses ran about $6,000 a month between Fritz's salary, the orchid supplies, food, utilities, and keeping 6 guard dogs fed, and we hadn't had a client in 3 weeks. Wolfe took the check, glanced at it, and passed it to me. "Archie, deposit this. Then return here. Mr. Kimball, I need information. Tell me everything about Martin Fels, his work, his relationships, his finances, his character, his habits. Leave nothing out. If he had enemies, name them. If he had secrets, reveal them. If you wish me to solve this murder, I must know the victim as well as you did." For the next 45 minutes, Kimball talked and I took notes. Martin Fels emerged from the description as exactly the kind of difficult genius that makes life interesting for everyone around him. Born in Providence, Rhode Island, 31 years old, never married, studied at the Art Students League, worked as a commercial illustrator for 5 years while developing his real art on the side. First solo show at Kimball's Gallery 4 years ago, a modest success. Second show 2 years ago, a breakthrough. Critics started paying attention. Collectors started buying. Prices climbed from $200 per painting to $2,000. But success hadn't improved Fels's character. He'd borrowed $800 from a fellow artist named Vincent Hardwick and never repaid it. He'd had an affair with Hardwick's girlfriend, an art model named Claudia Renshaw, which ended both the affair and the friendship. He'd insulted a critic named Lawrence Thorpe in print, calling Thorpe a fossil with a typewriter after Thorpe gave him a lukewarm review. He'd sold a painting to a collector named Gregory Ashford for $3,000, and Ashford later claimed the painting wasn't authentic, that Fels had copied the style of a more famous painter and tried to pass it off as original work. Was Ashford right? I asked. Kimball hesitated. Martin worked in the style of the Ashcan school, urban realism, dark colors, working-class subjects. It's possible that the painting resembled someone else's work, but I don't believe Martin deliberately copied anyone. He was too proud for that. But Ashford thought so? Ashford demanded his money back. Martin refused. They had a screaming match outside my gallery last December. Ashford threatened to sue. Martin told him to go to hell. As far as I know, Ashford never filed suit, but he's been telling everyone in the art world that Martin Fels was a fraud. I wrote down Gregory Ashford, angry collector, and underlined it twice. "What about the painting that was stolen?" Wolfe asked. "The $5,000 portrait. Who was the subject?" "A woman named Isabel Crane. She's a jazz singer at a club called the Blue Note. She'd commissioned Martin to paint her portrait for her 30th birthday. He'd been working on it for 6 weeks. She was scheduled to pick it up this past Saturday. Had she paid him?" "Half up front, $2,500, the balance due on delivery." "So Fels had $2,500 in cash recently?" "I assume so. Martin wasn't good with money. He probably spent it already." Wolfe grunted. "Who else knew about this painting?" "Everyone in the village, probably." Martin wasn't secretive about his work. He'd been talking about the commission for weeks, said it was the best thing he'd ever painted. Was it? Kimball's expression softened slightly. "I never saw the finished piece, but I saw preliminary sketches, and yes, it would have been extraordinary. Martin had a gift for capturing personality in portraiture. When he painted someone, you didn't just see their face, you saw their soul." From the kitchen came the sound of Fritz preparing lunch, the soft clatter of pots, the opening of the refrigerator, the hiss of something being added to a hot pan. The smell drifted down the hall, something involving butter and herbs, and probably enough calories to power a small factory. My stomach reminded me that it was now past noon, and Wolfe's schedule required lunch at 1:15 whether the world was ending or not. Wolfe glanced at me, and I nodded slightly. We had enough to start with. He shifted his considerable bulk in the chair and fixed Kimball with the look he reserves for moments when he's about to ask a question that will make someone uncomfortable. "Mr. Kimball, do you know why Delphine Mercier predicted that you would betray someone you love?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Kimball's face went carefully neutral, the expression of a man who'd been expecting this and had prepared his answer. "No," he said, "I don't." "You have no secrets? No divided loyalties? No situation in which profit and loyalty might conflict?" "Every art dealer faces those conflicts, Mr. Wolfe. An artist wants more money. A collector wants to pay less. I'm in the middle, but I've never betrayed anyone." Not yet, Wolfe said mildly, but perhaps Mademoiselle Mercier sees a future situation in which you will be tempted, or perhaps she knows of a past betrayal you've forgotten, or rationalized, or perhaps, and this is more likely, she said something deliberately vague that could apply to almost anyone, and you filled in the details with your own fears and guilt. Kimball's composure cracked slightly. Are you calling me a fool? I'm calling you human. We all have secrets we'd prefer to keep hidden. We all have moments we're not proud of. A clever fortune teller exploits those universal truths. She tells you that you'll betray someone, and you immediately think of all the times you've been tempted to do exactly that. She doesn't need supernatural powers. She just needs to understand human nature. Then you don't believe she's dangerous? I didn't say that. A person who manipulates others through psychological insight is often more dangerous than someone with a gun. But I don't believe she has supernatural powers, and I won't investigate this case on the assumption that she does. That's fine, Kimball said. I just want to know who killed Martin. Wolfe nodded. Archie will visit Greenwich Village this afternoon. He'll examine the crime scene, interview witnesses, and gather information. I'll expect his report this evening. If there's evidence of murder rather than robbery, we'll proceed. If not, I'll return most of your retainer and advise you to let the police handle it. The police aren't handling it. Then perhaps someone should. Wolfe pushed himself to his feet, with the slow inevitability of a geological formation achieving consciousness. That's all for now, Mr. Kimball. Archie will show you out. Don't leave the city without informing us. Don't discuss this investigation with anyone in Greenwich Village. Don't warn anyone that we're involved. If you do any of those things, I'll terminate our agreement. Kimball stood, looking slightly dazed, the usual effect of a 45-minute conversation with Nero Wolfe. I walked him to the front door, where Loyal was still maintaining his vigil. The pit bull watched Kimball leave with his characteristic intensity, and I saw the dog's ears swivel as Kimball's footsteps receded down the stoop. Good boy, I told Loyal, scratching behind his notched ear. That's one more civilian who understands that this brownstone takes security seriously. From the office, Wolfe's voice, Archie, come here. I returned to find him standing by the globe, one finger tracing the outline of Manhattan. He looked up as I entered. You'll need to see the studio where Fels died, he said. Interview the landlord, talk to other artists in the building, find out who had access to that studio, who knew about the painting, and who might have wanted Martin Fels dead. Then visit this Delphine Mercier, assess her. I want to know if she's a charlatan, a shrewd observer, or something more complex. You think she might be involved? I think anyone who predicted a murder 3 weeks before it happened deserves careful scrutiny. Either she's remarkably prescient, remarkably lucky, or remarkably guilty. And if she really is just a good guesser, then someone used her prediction as cover for murder, which makes her an accessory, whether she intended it or not. Either way, she's relevant. He returned to his desk and settled into his chair with a sigh. Greenwich Village, artists, mystics, bohemians with more passion than sense. This case will be tedious, Archie. Most of them are, I agreed, but it pays $10,000, and Fritz needs to buy more lamb chops for the dogs. Caesar's been giving me looks lately. I think he's planning a mutiny if his dinner portions get any smaller. From somewhere in the brownstone's interior came a soft woof, Caesar's way of confirming that yes, the feeding schedule was a matter of serious concern. Wolfe almost smiled. Go to Greenwich Village, find me evidence, I'll be here thinking. That's what you're best at, I said, and went to get my hat. Cornelia Street in Greenwich Village is one of those narrow tree-lined blocks where the 19th century forgot to leave and the 20th century never quite managed to take over. 3-story brownstones with stoops, iron railings painted black or green, small shops at street level selling antiques or used books or mysterious objects that might have been art or might have been junk. The kind of street where you could imagine Washington Irving taking a stroll or Edgar Allan Poe composing something suitably macabre. Number 47 was a brownstone that had seen better decades, with a cracked stoop and windows that needed washing. A hand-lettered sign in the ground floor window read, Walsh Properties, Studios for Rent. I climbed the steps, found the buzzer, and leaned on it. After a minute, the door opened to reveal a man in his 60s, short and barrel-chested, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen every variety of human foolishness and hadn't been impressed by any of it. He wore work trousers, stained with paint and plaster, a grey shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and an expression of permanent skepticism. Yeah? Eugene Walsh?
Depends who's asking.
Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe, the private investigator. We've been hired to look into Martin Fels's death. I'd like to see his studio, if that's possible. Walsh's skepticism deepened. Police already looked at it, told me I could rent it out again once they were done. You got authorization? I've got this, I said, pulling out a $20 bill and holding it where he could see it. Call it a consulting fee for your time and expertise. I just want to look around, ask a few questions, and understand what happened. No tricks, no trouble. He looked at the 20, looked at me, and apparently decided I wasn't a threat to his continued survival. Police said robbery. Broke in, stole a painting, hit Fels when he got in the way. Open and shut. Probably, I agreed, but my employer gets paid to double-check the obvious. Can I see the studio? Walsh pocketed the 20 with the smooth efficiency of a man who'd been accepting consulting fees his entire adult life. Third floor. I'll take you up, but I got work to do, so don't waste my time. He led me up a narrow staircase that creaked ominously under our combined weight. The building smelled of turpentine, oil paint and ancient plumbing. On the second floor landing, I could hear someone playing jazz piano, something complicated and melancholy that drifted through a closed door like smoke. How many studios you got here? I asked. 4. Ground floor's my office. Second floor's got 2. Pianist on the left, sculptor on the right. Third floor's got 2 more. Fels had the one in back, and there's a printmaker in front. Fourth floor's storage. So 6 people in the building total? 7, if you count me. Though the printmaker woman named Agnes Hartwell was out of town last week, visiting family in Boston. Didn't get back until Saturday morning. We reached the 3rd floor, and Walsh pulled out a ring of keys that would have made a medieval jailer envious. He unlocked a door marked 3B and pushed it open. Don't touch nothing, he said, and don't steal nothing. I know what's in there. I'll be the soul of discretion, I promised, and stepped inside. The studio was maybe 20 feet by 30 feet, with high ceilings and 2 large windows facing north, the kind of light that painters supposedly prefer. The floor was hardwood, stained and scarred by years of abuse. The walls were white, or had been once, now splattered with paint in every color that has a name and several that don't. In the center of the room stood an easel, empty. Beside it, a table covered with brushes, palette knives, tubes of paint and jars of murky liquid that had once been clean turpentine. Against the far wall was a daybed covered with a paint-stained blanket. Near the windows, a small table and 2 chairs, the minimal furniture of someone who used space for work, not comfort. And on the floor, about 6 feet from the easel, was a dark stain that hadn't come from spilled paint. That's where I found him, Walsh said from the doorway. Saturday morning about 9:30. I came up to collect rent. First of the month he owed me $75. Door was unlocked, which should have told me something was wrong. Fels always kept his door locked when he was working. Didn't want people just walking in on him. But the door was unlocked when you got here. Wide open, not just unlocked open, like someone left in a hurry. I filed that away and moved closer to the bloodstain. It was roughly 3 feet in diameter, dried to a dark brown. Beside it, a heavy metal sculpture stand lay on its side, the kind used to display finished works. About 5 feet tall, solid iron, probably weighed 20 pounds. The base was stained with something that matched the floor. That's what killed him, Walsh said. Someone hit him with that. Probably from behind. From what the cops said. Fels never saw it coming. Where was it usually kept? Over there by the wall. Fels used it to hold a sculpture he'd bought from the guy downstairs. Fancy bronze thing, supposed to represent modern industrial man, or some such nonsense. Worth maybe $50 if you found the right idiot to buy it. And the sculpture, still here, on the shelf behind you. I turned and saw it, an abstract bronze figure that looked like someone had taken a human being and put it through a taffy puller. Modern art. I'd never understood it, and I suspected that most of the people who claimed to understand it were lying through their expensive teeth. So someone took the sculpture stand, hit Fels with it, and then what? Took the painting and ran. That's what the cops figured. Door was open, painting was gone, Fels was dead. Simple as that. Nothing else missing? Not that I could tell. I don't know what all he had in here. It was his studio, not mine. But his wallet was gone too. Cops figured the thief took it for the cash. How much cash would Fels have had? No idea, but he'd just gotten paid $2,500 for that portrait, so probably at least some of that. I walked slowly around the studio, looking at everything, touching nothing. The windows were intact, no signs of forced entry. The door had a simple lock, the kind you could open with a credit card if you knew what you were doing. No signs of struggle except for the bloodstain and the fallen sculpture stand. On the table near the easel, I found a stack of sketches, preliminary drawings for various paintings. I flipped through them carefully, faces, mostly, some realistic, some more abstract, and near the bottom of the stack, several drawings of a woman with striking features, high cheekbones, full lips, eyes that seemed to look right through you even in charcoal. This the woman Fels was painting? Isabel Crane? Walsh came over to look. Yeah, that's her. Jazz singer. Comes around here sometimes, checking on progress. Real looker, that one. Voice like velvet. Saw her perform once at the Blue Note. Best singer in the village, no question. She been here since Friday. Saturday morning, came by to pick up her portrait. Found cops everywhere instead. She was pretty broken up about it. Crying, asking how it could have happened. Saying Fels was going to be famous someday. The whole tragic scene. But she got her $2,500 back, right? If the painting's gone, she's not obligated to pay. Walsh shrugged. Not my business. But yeah, I guess she's off the hook. I made a note to talk to Isabel Crane. A woman who'd paid $2,500 for a portrait that never materialized might have a motive for making sure it stayed that way, especially if she'd changed her mind about wanting it but couldn't get out of the contract. Tell me about Friday night, I said. Anyone see or hear anything unusual? I didn't. I live on the ground floor, back apartment. Didn't hear nothing. But the sculptor on 2 guy named Vincent Hardwick, he told the cops he heard arguing up here around 10 o'clock. What kind of arguing?
Voices.
2 people going at it. He couldn't make out words, but he said one of them was Fels for sure. He'd recognize that voice anywhere. The other one he wasn't sure about. Vincent Hardwick. That was the artist Fels had borrowed money from and never repaid. The same artist whose girlfriend Fels had stolen. Interesting that he was the one who reported hearing the argument. Hardwick say anything else? Said the argument lasted maybe 5 minutes, then went quiet. He figured Fels and whoever it was had settled their differences. Didn't think nothing of it until I found the body next morning. And the pianist? She hear anything? Nah. Barbara Lyle. She teaches piano during the day, plays clubs at night, wasn't home Friday night until after midnight, and by then it was all over. I walked to the windows and looked out. The view was of a small courtyard shared by several buildings, fire escapes, garbage cans, a scraggly tree attempting to survive against all odds. No obvious way for someone to enter or exit except through the front door. Mr. Walsh, does Martin Fels strike you as the kind of man who'd let a stranger into his studio at 10 o'clock at night? Hell no. Fels was paranoid about his work. Didn't let nobody in here except people he knew and trusted. If someone was in this studio Friday night, Fels let them in. So probably not a random robbery. Walsh snorted. I could have told the cops that. But what do I know? I just collect rent and fix toilets. I'm not a detective. Lucky for me I am, I said. Or at least I work for one. Mind if I talk to the other tenants? Suit yourself. Hardwick's probably in his studio. He works all day. Barbara's teaching somewhere. Agnes just got back from Boston, but she might talk to you. And there's one more person you should talk to. Who? The witch. He said it flatly, without inflection. Delphine Mercier. She was here Friday afternoon, about 4 o'clock. Came to see Fels. They talked in here for maybe 20 minutes, then she left. I felt my pulse quicken. You're sure? I was fixing a radiator on the 2nd floor. Saw her go up. Saw her come down. Hard to miss her. She dresses like she's in a opera or something. All in black, with this long coat, and a hat with a veil. Real dramatic. She come here often? First time I'd seen her. But Fels went to her gatherings sometimes. He talked about her. Called her interesting. Said she had real insight into human nature. Did he believe she could predict the future? Walsh laughed. A short bark without humor. Fels didn't believe in nothing except his own genius. But he liked her attention, liked that she singled him out, made him feel special. That's what she does, you know. Makes people feel like they're the center of the universe, like their lives matter, and they eat it up. You ever go to one of her gatherings? Once. Curiosity. She told me I was carrying guilt about someone I'd failed to protect, and that the guilt would poison my life unless I forgave myself. He shrugged. My kid brother died in the war. I wasn't there. Guess that counts. But it could apply to half the men my age in New York. War killed a lot of brothers. So you think she's a fraud? I think she's smart. Real smart. Knows how to read people. Knows what buttons to push. Whether that makes her a fraud or just good at her job, I couldn't say. But I'll tell you one thing. She predicted Martin Fels would die, and 3 weeks later, he's dead. That's either real coincidence or real clever planning. I thanked Walsh and asked him to send Vincent Hardwick up if he was available. While I waited, I went through the rest of the studio methodically. Nothing jumped out as obviously significant, just the usual artist's clutter, the accumulated debris of a creative life. But in a small drawer beneath the table, I found something interesting, a ledger, the kind used to track expenses and income. I flipped through it quickly. Fels had been meticulous about recording his earnings and spending. The most recent entry was dated Thursday, April 17th, 2 days before his death. Paid by I. Crane, $2,500 deposit for portrait. And then below that another entry, D. Mercier, consultation, $200. So Fels had paid Delphine Mercier $200 for something. Consultation. The same day she'd come to his studio, presumably. What had they consulted about? Footsteps on the stairs interrupted my thoughts. A moment later, a man appeared in the doorway. Tall, thin, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from wood by someone who didn't like him very much. Dark hair, dark eyes, a sculptor's hands stained with clay. He wore work clothes and an expression of barely controlled hostility. You the detective? His voice was rough, unpolished, working-class Boston overlaid with years in New York. Archie Goodwin. You're Vincent Hardwick? Yeah. Walsh said you wanted to talk about Martin. Not sure what I can tell you that I didn't already tell the cops. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps, I said easily. Mind if I ask a few questions? Would it matter if I did? Not particularly. I'm persistent when I'm being paid to be. I gestured to the bloodstain on the floor. You heard arguing up here Friday night, around 10 o'clock. That's right. Voices. Couldn't make out words. But one of them was Martin, for sure. The other I couldn't identify. Man or woman? He hesitated. Man, I think. But I'm not certain. The walls are thick. Sound carries funny. How long did the argument last? 5 minutes maybe, then quiet. I figured they'd settled whatever it was. And you didn't go up to check? Why would I? Martin argued with everybody. It was his favorite hobby. I figured it was just another day in paradise for our resident genius. The sarcasm was thick enough to spread on toast. You didn't like Martin Fels. I didn't like Martin Fels, Hardwick agreed. He owed me $800. He stole my girlfriend. He insulted my work every chance he got. So no, I didn't like him. But I didn't kill him either, if that's what you're thinking. Where were you Friday night? In my studio. Working. I'm preparing for a show next month. Have to finish 6 pieces by May 15th. I work every night, usually until 2 or 3 in the morning. Anyone verify that? Just me. I work alone. But you can ask Barbara Lyle. She came home around midnight, and my lights were on. She mentioned it to me Saturday morning. What time did you finally stop working? Around 3. Then I went to bed. And you didn't go up to check on Martin after the argument stopped? No. Why would I? Like I said, Martin argued with everybody. I heard him yelling at someone last week too, and the week before that, it was normal. Who was he arguing with those times? No idea. I don't keep track of Martin's social calendar. I let that sit for a moment watching him. Hardwick's hostility was genuine, but it didn't necessarily mean guilt. Some people just don't like being questioned. Tell me about Claudia Renshaw, I said. His expression went carefully blank. What about her? She was your girlfriend. Then she was Martin's girlfriend. Then she was neither. What happened? Martin happened. He decided he wanted her. So he took her, told her I was a hack sculptor with no future, told her he could introduce her to real artists, real collectors, real opportunity. She believed him. 6 months later, he got bored and dumped her. Last I heard, she was modeling for other artists and drinking too much. You still in touch with her? No. Why would I be? Because betrayal sometimes creates stronger bonds than affection. Because $800 is a lot of money. Because Martin Fels destroyed something you cared about. Revenge is a powerful motivator, Mr. Hardwick. I didn't kill Martin, he said flatly. I wanted to. I fantasized about it. But I didn't do it. When the cops asked me where I was Friday night, I told them the truth in my studio working. And that's all I'm going to tell you. He turned and walked out before I could ask another question. I heard his footsteps descending the stairs, heavy and angry. I spent another 20 minutes in Fels' studio, finding nothing particularly useful, then locked up and went down to the second floor. Walsh had said the pianist Barbara Lyle probably wasn't home, but I tried her door anyway. No answer. I was about to leave when a voice behind me said, "She won't be back until 4:30. She teaches piano at a school in Chelsea on Wednesdays." I turned. The voice belonged to a woman in her 50s, short and round, with steel grey hair cut in a practical bob, and the kind of face that suggested she'd seen everything and hadn't been particularly impressed by any of it. She wore a work smock covered in ink stains and carried a cup of tea. "Agnes Hartwell?" I guessed. "That's right. And you're the detective Walsh mentioned. Archie Goodwin, working for Nero Wolfe." News travels fast. Walsh talks loud. I've been listening to him stomp around downstairs for 3 years. I know his moods better than my own. She took a sip of tea. "You want to know about Martin Fels?" "If you've got information, I'll take it." "I wasn't here when he died. I was in Boston visiting my sister. Got back Saturday morning, found the whole building swarming with police. But I knew Martin, worked in the same building for 2 years. He was talented, arrogant, and doomed." Doomed. Delphine told him so. 3 weeks ago at one of her gatherings. I was there. She looked at Martin and told him death was walking beside him. Everyone heard it. Everyone remembered it. And now he's dead, exactly as she predicted. Agnes Hartwell's expression was unreadable. "You believe in fate, Mr. Goodwin?" "I believe in cause and effect," I said. "Someone hit Martin Fels with a sculpture stand and stole his painting. That's not fate. That's murder." "Maybe. Or maybe the universe has patterns we don't understand. And Delphine sees those patterns. I've been going to her gatherings for 6 months. She's told me things about myself that no one could know. Private things. True things." "Such as?" "That's between me and my conscience, Mr. Goodwin. But I'll tell you this, Delphine isn't a fraud. She's the real thing. Whether that makes her dangerous or just rare, I don't know. But she sees things other people don't." "Did she ever tell you anything about Martin Fels besides the prediction about his death?" Agnes hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Once, about 2 months ago, she told him that his greatest work would also be his last, that he would create something so true, so perfect, that it would seal his fate. He laughed it off at the time, called her dramatic. But now, she trailed off meaningfully. The portrait of Isabel Crane, that was his greatest work? According to Martin, yes. He said it was the best thing he'd ever painted, that it captured something essential about her, not just her beauty, but her soul. He was very proud of it. Ever see it? No, he was secretive about it. Didn't want anyone to see it until it was finished. But he talked about it constantly, said it would make his reputation, that collectors would pay $10,000 for his work after this. $10,000, double what Isabel Crane had agreed to pay. I filed that away and thanked Agnes Hartwell for her time. She retreated into her studio, and I headed downstairs and back out onto Cornelia Street. The afternoon sun slanted through the buildings, creating long shadows. 2 men in paint-stained work clothes stood on the corner, arguing about whether Cézanne was a genius or a fraud. A woman pushed a baby carriage past me, humming something that sounded like Gershwin, Greenwich Village in spring. The kind of neighborhood where art mattered more than money and talent excused almost any sin. I needed to talk to Delphine Mercier. But first I wanted to see Isabel Crane, a woman who'd commissioned a $5,000 portrait and then lost both the painting and the painter deserved a conversation. The Blue Note was on West 3rd Street, a basement club, that had been hosting jazz musicians since before I was born. At 3 in the afternoon it was closed, but I could hear music drifting up from below, someone practicing, running scales, getting ready for the evening show. I found the side entrance, a plain door with peeling paint and no sign, and knocked. After a moment, it opened to reveal a black man in his 40s, thin as a reed, with fingers that looked like they'd been designed specifically to play piano. He looked at me with the polite indifference of someone who'd spent his life being interrupted. "We're closed until 7, he said. His voice was soft, cultured, with a hint of the South buried under years of New York. "I'm not here for the show," I said. "I'm looking for Isabel Crane. Is she here?" "Who's asking?" "Archie Goodwin, private investigator. I'm looking into Martin Fels's death." His expression shifted slightly. "You police?" "Private, working for a client who wants to know what really happened." He studied me for a moment, then stepped aside. "She's downstairs, rehearsing, but if you upset her, I'll throw you out myself. She's had a rough week." "I'll be gentle," I promised. He led me down a narrow staircase into the club proper, a low-ceilinged room with a small stage at one end, tables and chairs scattered in the middle, and a bar running along the left wall. The walls were covered with photographs of musicians who'd played here over the years: Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Dizzy Gillespie, the gods of jazz captured in black and white. On stage, a woman stood at the microphone, eyes closed, singing something slow and melancholy. She had the kind of voice that made you forget where you were, rich and dark and full of things that couldn't be said in ordinary words. She was tall, maybe 5'9", with the kind of beauty that comes from excellent bones and perfect proportions. Dark hair pulled back, elegant neck, a face that belonged on a movie screen or in a museum painting. She finished the song, opened her eyes, and saw me standing there. "Who's this, Marcus?" The piano player Marcus, apparently, said, "Detective, says he wants to talk about Martin." Her expression went carefully neutral. "I already talked to the police." "I'm not the police," I said. "I'm Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. We've been hired to investigate Martin Fels's death." "By who?" "A client who'd prefer to remain anonymous." "Well, tell your client I'm not interested in talking about Martin to anyone. I've already been through it once with the police, and I don't want to go through it again." "I understand," I said, staying where I was. "Losing a friend is hard. Losing a friend who was painting your portrait is even harder. But someone killed Martin Fels, and I'd like to find out who." The police said it was a robbery. The police say a lot of things. Sometimes they're even right. But I have questions, and you might have answers. 5 minutes of your time, Miss Crane. That's all I'm asking. She looked at me for a long moment, weighing options. Finally, she sighed. "Fine, 5 minutes. Marcus, take a break." The piano player nodded and disappeared through a door marked "Employees Only." Isabel Crane stepped down from the stage and gestured to one of the tables. We sat, and I got out my notebook. "Tell me about the portrait," I said. "What about it? Why did you commission it? $5,000 is serious money for a portrait." "I'm turning 30 this month," she said. "I've been singing in clubs since I was 18. I've made decent money, saved some of it, built a career, and I wanted something to mark the occasion, something permanent. A good painting lasts forever. I'll get old, my voice will fade, but that portrait would have been a record of who I was at the peak of my life, or at least that's what I thought when I commissioned it. And now the portrait's gone. Along with Martin, yes. You paid him $2,500 up front, the rest due on delivery. With the portrait gone, I assume you get your money back?" Her eyes flashed. "Are you suggesting I had something to do with Martin's death?" "I'm suggesting that $2,500 is a good reason to make sure a portrait never gets delivered. Did you change your mind about wanting it? Did you see the finished work and decide it wasn't worth $5,000? Or did Martin show you something in that portrait you didn't want the world to see?" She stood abruptly. "Your 5 minutes are up, Mr. Goodwin. Get out." "Miss Crane, get out, or I'll have Marcus throw you out. And Marcus is stronger than he looks." I stood slowly, putting my notebook away. "One more question. When did you last see Martin Fels alive?" "Thursday night. He called me, said the portrait was almost finished, that I could pick it up Saturday morning. He sounded excited, proud, said it was the best thing he'd ever painted. Her voice softened slightly. That was the last time I talked to him. Friday night, someone killed him, and now I'll never see the portrait. So no, Mr. Goodwin, I didn't kill Martin Fels. I wanted that painting. I wanted it very much. Did he tell you anything else? Mention anyone who was angry with him? Anyone who might want to steal the painting? Martin always had enemies. Other artists who were jealous, collectors who thought he'd cheated them, women he'd dumped. But he didn't seem worried. He said the portrait was going to make his career, that everyone would finally understand what he'd been trying to do. He was happy, Mr. Goodwin, really happy. And 2 days later, he was dead. She turned away, and I could see her shoulders shaking slightly. Marcus reappeared from the back room, his expression making it clear that my time was up. I left the Blue Note and stood on West 3rd Street, thinking. Isabel Crane's grief seemed genuine. Her anger about the lost portrait seemed genuine too. But genuine emotion didn't rule out guilt. People killed for all sorts of reasons, and $2,500 was a pretty good one. It was now close to 4 o'clock, and I still needed to talk to Delphine Mercier. According to Kimball, she held her gatherings at an apartment on Bleecker Street. Time to meet the witch. The address Kimball had given me, 227 Bleecker Street, turned out to be a 4-story building with a faded red door and windows that looked out onto a street full of coffee houses, bookstores and small theaters. I climbed to the 3rd floor and found a door painted black, with a brass knocker shaped like a crescent moon. I knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and I got my first look at Delphine Mercier. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, though with some women it's hard to tell. Tall, slender, with dark hair pulled back in a severe style that emphasized her cheekbones and the line of her jaw. She wore black, a simple dress that could have been mourning clothes or just fashionable, and no jewelry except for a silver ring on her right hand. Her eyes were grey, intelligent, and completely unreadable. "Mr. Archie Goodwin," she said. Her voice was low, musical, with an accent I couldn't quite place. French, maybe, but polished by years away from home. "I've been expecting you." I kept my expression neutral. "Have you?" "You work for Nero Wolfe. Jasper Kimball hired you this morning to investigate Martin Fels's death. You visited the studio on Cornelia Street, talked to Eugene Walsh and Vincent Hardwick and Agnes Hartwell. You visited Isabel Crane at the Blue Note. And now you're here. I would have been disappointed if you hadn't come." "You keep track of people's movements?" I asked. "I keep track of patterns," she said. "And you, Mr. Goodwin, are now part of a very interesting pattern. Come in. We should talk." She stepped aside, and I entered an apartment that looked like someone had kidnapped a French salon and transported it to Greenwich Village. Dark furniture, heavy curtains, bookshelves packed with volumes in multiple languages, a table in the center of the room covered with a black cloth, and on the cloth a deck of cards. Not playing cards, something older, more ornate. Tarot, probably. "Please sit." She gestured to a chair at the table. "Can I offer you tea, coffee, something stronger?" "I'm fine," I said, sitting. "I just want to ask you some questions about Martin Fels." "Of course you do. Everyone wants to know about Martin Fels. The police asked me questions on Saturday. Jasper Kimball has been asking questions for 3 weeks. And now you. Everyone wants to understand how I knew he would die. Did you know, or did you guess?" She smiled slightly. "Does it matter?" To Nero Wolfe, it does. He doesn't believe in fortune-telling. Neither do I. But I do believe in observation, deduction, and sometimes just being very, very perceptive. Which are you, Miss Mercier? Perceptive or something else? "I see patterns," she said, sitting across from me. "Patterns in behavior, patterns in choice, patterns in the way people move through their lives. Some people call it intuition. Some call it insight. Some call it witchcraft. I call it attention. 3 weeks ago, you told Martin Fels he would die. You described how it would happen alone, with something precious, killed by greed. You were right. How?" "I saw the pattern. Martin was a man who valued his work above everything else. He was painting a portrait that he believed would make his career. He talked about it constantly. The skill required, the perfection he was achieving, the money it would bring him. Everyone in the village knew about it, and I knew that when you advertise value, you attract greed. Someone would want that painting. someone would be willing to kill for it. That's not a prediction, that's logic. Exactly. I don't predict the future, Mr. Goodwin. I extrapolate from present circumstances. I see where current trajectories lead. Most people call that wisdom. In my case, they call it witchcraft. The only difference is presentation. So you're a fraud. I'm a consultant. People come to me because they're lost, confused, uncertain. I help them see their own patterns. Sometimes that looks like magic. Sometimes it just looks like paying attention. And you charge for this service. I charge for my time and expertise, just like your employer charges for his. Are you calling Nero Wolfe a fraud because he gets paid to think? That was a fair point, and I acknowledged it with a slight nod. Tell me about your visit to Martin Fels on Friday afternoon. Eugene Walsh saw you go into his studio around 4 o'clock. What did you talk about? Her expression didn't change. Who says I visited him? Walsh says. And Martin's ledger says he paid you $200 that day for a consultation. So I'm asking, what did you consult about? For the first time she hesitated. It was brief, barely noticeable, but it was there. Martin wanted advice. About what? About whether to deliver the portrait to Isabel Crane. That was unexpected. Why wouldn't he? Because he'd been offered $20,000 for it by someone else. A collector, someone who'd seen the preliminary sketches and wanted the finished work. But Martin had a contract with Isabel. He'd taken her money, and he was trying to decide whether to honor the contract or take the better offer. $20,000. That changed everything. Who was the collector? I don't know. Martin didn't tell me. He just said someone had approached him, made an extraordinary offer, and he was tempted. But he knew that if he broke his contract with Isabel, his reputation would suffer. No one would commission work from him again. So he asked me what he should do. And you told him. I told him that greed would be his undoing, that if he chose money over honor, he would lose everything. And I was right, wasn't I? Or you made it happen, I said flatly. You told him greed would kill him, and then you arranged for exactly that to happen. If you knew about the $20,000 offer, you could have told the collector where to find Martin, when he'd be alone, and how to take the painting. You'd get your consultation fee, the collector would get the painting, and you'd have another accurate prediction to add to your reputation. Her eyes went cold. That's an interesting theory, Mr. Goodwin. Do you have any evidence? Not yet, but I will. Then I look forward to seeing it. In the meantime, I'll tell you what I told the police. I visited Martin Friday afternoon. We talked for 20 minutes. I left. He was alive and well. I went home, had dinner, read a book, and went to bed. I didn't kill him, and I didn't arrange for anyone else to kill him. Who knew about the $20,000 offer? Besides Martin and the collector, I have no idea. Martin might have told other people. He wasn't particularly discreet. Did he tell you whether he'd decided what to do? No. He said he needed time to think. That was the last I saw of him. I stood. I'll need you to write down everything you remember about that conversation. Every detail. Nero Wolfe will want to see it. Of course. She rose gracefully. I'll have it delivered to your office this evening. One more thing. Jasper Kimball says you predicted he would betray someone he loves. Why? Because I see him making the same choices Martin made. Putting profit above loyalty. It hasn't happened yet, but it will. The pattern is there. And if your prediction causes it to happen, if Kimball spends so much time worrying about betrayal that he actually commits it, then the pattern was always there. I just made it visible. She walked me to the door. People blame fortune tellers for the truths they reveal, Mr. Goodwin. But we don't create reality. We just show people what they'd rather not see. Or you manipulate them into fulfilling your predictions. I said, either way, someone is dead, and someone else is scared. That makes you involved, Miss Mercier, and involvement means scrutiny. Scrutinize away, she said calmly. I have nothing to hide. I left her apartment and headed back toward West 35th Street. The afternoon had stretched into early evening, and the streets of Greenwich Village were coming alive, musicians heading to clubs, artists heading to galleries, the whole bohemian machinery warming up for another night of creativity and chaos. My head was full of information, most of it contradictory. Martin Fels had enemies, Vincent Hardwick, who'd lost money, and a girlfriend, Gregory Ashford, who'd accused him of selling a fake, Isabel Crane, who'd paid $2,500 and gotten nothing in return, and now there was a mysterious collector willing to pay $20,000 for the portrait. A collector whose identity no one seemed to know. Delphine Mercier was either very clever or very perceptive, and I wasn't sure which possibility disturbed me more. She'd visited Fels hours before he died, had predicted his death weeks earlier, and seemed completely comfortable with the whole situation. By the time I reached the brownstone, it was after 6. I let myself in, heard the immediate soft padding of paws as Loyal came to investigate, then the heavier tread of Caesar and Mars. The evening patrol, checking on who'd come home. "Easy, boys," I said, giving Loyal a scratch behind his notched ear. "It's just me. No assassins tonight." Fritz appeared from the kitchen, his face arranged in the expression of concern he reserves for when I've missed dinner. "Archie, you are late. Mr. Wolfe was asking about you. Tell him I'm here and I have things to report. Give me 5 minutes to wash up and I'll join him in the office." I went upstairs, washed my hands and face, changed into a clean shirt, and returned to the office. Wolfe was behind his desk, a bottle of beer at his right hand, a book open in front of him. He looked up as I entered. "Well," I took my seat and gave him the full report. The studio, the bloodstain, the missing painting, the sculpture stand that killed Fels, the conversations with Walsh, Hardwick, Hartwell, Isabel Crane and Delphine Mercier, the mysterious collector offering $20,000, the fact that Delphine had visited Fels hours before his death. Wolfe listened without interruption, his eyes half closed, his fingers laced across his belly. When I finished, he remained silent for a full minute thinking. "The portrait," he said finally, "that's the key. Someone wanted it badly enough to kill for it. The question is who and why. Could be the mysterious collector. $20,000 is a lot, but some people don't like waiting or negotiating. Easier to just take what you want. Perhaps the $20,000 offer was fiction. A lie Fels told to inflate his own importance or a lie Delphine told to deflect suspicion. We don't know the offer existed. We know Martin's ledger shows Delphine paid him, or he paid her, $200 last Thursday. For a consultation. Yes, that much is documented, but the rest is merely her word." He opened his eyes fully. "Archie, I need you to find 3 people. The mysterious collector, if he exists, Claudia Renshaw, the girlfriend Vincent Hardwick lost to Fels, and Gregory Ashford, the collector who accused Fels of selling a fake. One of those 3 may be our murderer. Or it could be Isabel Crane. Possibly, but I doubt it. A woman who wants a painting badly enough to pay $5,000 doesn't arrange for it to be stolen and destroyed. She might kill the artist out of anger or betrayal, but she wouldn't eliminate the work itself. Unless she saw the finished portrait and hated it, or saw something in it she didn't want the world to see." Wolfe grunted, acknowledging the point. "Then add her to your list, find these people, interview them, get their alibis for Friday night, and see if you can locate the painting. $5,000 worth of art doesn't just vanish. Actually, it does. That's what makes art theft profitable. Not in this case. The painting wasn't stolen by professional art thieves. It was taken by someone in Greenwich Village, someone who knew Martin Fels, someone who had access to his studio. That person either still has the painting or has already sold it. Find out which." I nodded and started making notes. "What about Delphine Mercier? You want me to dig into her background?" "Yes, I want to know where she came from, how she makes her living, whether she has any connection to Martin Fels beyond the consultation, and I want to know if she's truly perceptive or merely lucky." "She's something," I said. "I'll give her that. She knew I was coming before I knocked on her door." "Did she? Or did she simply make an educated guess based on Kimball's visit this morning and the predictable course of an investigation? Don't be seduced by mysticism, Archie. There's always an explanation." "Sure, but sometimes the explanation is that someone is genuinely smarter than everyone else. Then we'll determine that through evidence, not through atmosphere." He pushed his beer aside and stood. "It's time for dinner. Fritz has prepared duck with orange sauce, and I intend to enjoy it. You can resume your investigation tomorrow morning." "What are you going to do?" "Think," he said. "That's what I'm best at." Thursday morning arrived, with the kind of grey drizzle that makes New York look like a Gothic novel. I was at my desk by 8:30, working through a list of people I needed to find, and questions I needed to ask, when the phone rang. Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. Mr. Goodwin, this is Detective Rowcliffe. I understand you've been poking around in the Martin Fels case. Rowcliffe. I knew the name. A homicide detective with the NYPD. Middle-aged, competent, and perpetually annoyed that civilians kept interfering in police business. I'd met him once before on a previous case, and we'd developed the kind of mutual respect that consists mostly of staying out of each other's way. That's right, I said. We've been hired by a client to investigate. Is there a problem? The problem is that this is an open case, Mr. Goodwin. We don't need amateur detectives muddying the waters. Professional detective, I corrected. And from what I hear, you've already classified this as a robbery gone wrong. If that's the case, why do you care if I ask a few questions? Because when private investigators start asking questions, witnesses get confused. They start remembering things differently. They start wondering if maybe the police missed something. And then we get complaints from people who think we're not doing our jobs. Are you doing your jobs? There was a brief silence. We're following the evidence, Mr. Goodwin. That's what we always do. And the evidence says Martin Fels surprised a thief, got killed for his trouble, and the thief took a valuable painting and Fels's wallet. Simple as that. What about the argument Vincent Hardwick heard at 10 o'clock? Fels had arguments all the time. Doesn't mean anything. What about Delphine Mercier's prediction? Coincidence? She made a vague prediction that could apply to almost anyone, and when Fels died, everyone remembered it and thought she was a prophet. It's basic psychology. What about the mysterious collector offering $20,000 for the portrait? Another silence, longer this time. What collector? The one Delphine Mercier says approached Martin Fels on Friday afternoon. Offered him 20 grand for the portrait of Isabel Crane. 4 times what Crane was paying. You didn't know about that? No one mentioned it. Might want to follow up on that. Because if there's a collector out there willing to pay 20,000, and the painting is now missing, that's motive. Or it's a lie, Rowcliffe said. Either way, I'll look into it. But I want you to back off, Mr. Goodwin. This is a police matter. I'll back off when my client tells me to. Until then, I'm investigating. But I'll share information if you'll do the same. I don't make deals with private investigators. Your loss, I said cheerfully. Have a good day, detective. I hung up before he could respond. The phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was Saul Panzer, one of Wolfe's best freelance operatives, a small nondescript man who could blend into any environment and extract information the way other people extracted teeth. Archie, I've got something on Delphine Mercier. That was fast. I made some calls. Turns out she's not French. She's from Cleveland. Real name is Dorothy Miller. Changed it about 5 years ago when she moved to New York. Before that, she worked as a research assistant for a psychology professor at Western Reserve University. Studied persuasion techniques, cold reading, social manipulation. So she's a trained psychologist. Not officially. Never finished her degree. But she learned enough to make a living convincing people she can read their futures. She's smart, Archie. Real smart. And she's careful. No criminal record, no lawsuits, nothing to suggest she's anything other than a very successful fortune teller. What about her finances? That's where it gets interesting. She pulls in about $15,000 a year from her consultations and gatherings. Not bad for someone who's essentially telling people what they want to hear. But she also has a partner, a man named Roland DeWitt. He's an art dealer. Small gallery in Soho, specializes in contemporary American paintings. Roland DeWitt, an art dealer. That was a connection I hadn't expected. How long have they been partners? About 3 years. They're not romantically involved, as far as I can tell. More like business partners. DeWitt supplies information. Who's buying, who's selling, what's valuable, and Delphine uses it to make her predictions seem more accurate. Symbiotic relationship. Does DeWitt handle stolen art? I couldn't find evidence of that. But he's got connections. Knows people in the art world. Knows collectors. Knows who wants what. If someone needed to move a stolen painting quietly, DeWitt would know how to do it. Good work, Saul. Can you find out if DeWitt knew Martin Fels? Already did. They met twice. Once last year at a gallery opening, and again 3 months ago when DeWitt visited Fels's studio. Supposedly, DeWitt was interested in representing Fels, but nothing came of it. Or maybe DeWitt was scouting, seeing what Fels was working on, who his clients were, what pieces might be worth stealing. That's one theory. Dig deeper, I said. I want to know everything about Roland DeWitt, his finances, his associates, his movements last Friday night. If he's connected to this murder, I want proof. Will do. I'll call you back this afternoon. I hung up and made notes. Delphine Mercier, real name Dorothy Miller, trained in psychological manipulation, partnered with an art dealer who knew Martin Fels. That was more than coincidence. That was motive and opportunity. I was just about to head back to Greenwich Village when Fritz appeared with a message. Archie, a woman is here to see you. She says her name is Claudia Renshaw, and she needs to talk about Martin Fels. Well, that was convenient. Show her in. Claudia Renshaw turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from a woman who'd modeled for artists and dated difficult painters. Beautiful, intelligent, and carrying the kind of weariness that comes from having your heart broken more than once. She was in her late 20s, with auburn hair, green eyes, and the kind of bone structure that photographers dream about. She wore a simple dress and a cardigan, and her hands shook slightly as she sat down. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Her voice was soft, educated. "Connecticut or Rhode Island, probably. I heard you were investigating Martin's death. I wanted to talk to you before things get more complicated." "What things?" "The police came to see me yesterday. Asked me where I was Friday night. Asked me about my relationship with Martin. They think I might have killed him." Her hands twisted together. "I didn't. I swear I didn't. But I don't have an alibi, and I know how this looks." "Tell me your side," I said, pulling out my notebook. "Martin and I were together for 6 months. He was brilliant, charming, impossible. I thought I loved him, but he was using me to make Vincent jealous, using me to prove he could take whatever he wanted. When he got bored, he dumped me. That was last November. I haven't spoken to him since." "Where were you Friday night?" "Home, alone. I live in a studio apartment on Barrow Street. No roommates, no witnesses. I was reading, listening to the radio, and then I went to bed. That's the truth, Mr. Goodwin. But I can't prove it." "Why come here? Why not just talk to the police?" "Because the police have already decided it was a robbery. They're not really investigating, and I'm scared that if they need someone to blame, they'll blame me. But if you're investigating, if you're actually trying to find out what happened, maybe you can find the truth before they arrest me for something I didn't do." I studied her. The fear was genuine, the desperation was genuine, but that didn't make her innocent. "Did Martin owe you money?" "No." "Did he steal something from you?" "Just my dignity, but you can't get that back." "Did you know about the portrait he was painting for Isabel Crane?" "Everyone knew about it. Martin talked about it constantly, said it was going to make him famous." "Did you want to see it?" She hesitated. "Yes. I was curious. I wondered if he'd paint her the way he used to paint me, like I was the most important person in the world. That's what Martin did. He made you feel seen, and then he made you feel invisible. So you had motive, revenge for how he treated you." "I had motive 6 months ago, Mr. Goodwin, but I didn't kill him then, and I didn't kill him now. I moved on, found other work, other friends. Martin Fels was part of my past, not my present." "Who do you think killed him?" "I don't know, but it wasn't random. Martin kept his studio locked. He didn't let strangers in. Whoever killed him was someone he knew, someone he trusted enough to open the door for." That matched what everyone else had said. I made a note and asked a few more questions, got her address and phone number, and told her I'd be in touch if I needed more information. After she left, I sat at my desk for a moment, thinking. Claudia Renshaw didn't feel like a murderer, but then most murderers don't. They feel like ordinary people who made one terrible decision and then tried to cover it up. I needed to find Gregory Ashford, the collector who'd accused Martin Fels of selling a fake, and I needed to find Roland DeWitt, Delphine Mercier's partner, and I needed to figure out who the mysterious collector offering $20,000 actually was, if he existed at all. The phone rang again. This time it was Saul, calling back with more information. "Archie, I found something. Roland DeWitt was at a gallery opening in Soho Friday night. Multiple witnesses put him there from 8 until past midnight. He couldn't have killed Martin Fels. Damn. That eliminates him as the murderer. But he could still be involved, could have arranged it, could have known about it. Maybe. But there's more. I talked to a dealer who knows DeWitt. He says DeWitt's been looking for a specific painting, a portrait by Martin Fels. Said DeWitt had a client who wanted it, and DeWitt was willing to pay top dollar. How much top dollar? He didn't say exactly, but he implied it was a lot. More than the painting would normally be worth. $20,000. It fit. Did your source say who the client was? No. DeWitt keeps that kind of information private, but I'm working on it. Keep working, and see if you can find Gregory Ashford. I want to talk to him about that fake painting accusation. Already on it. I'll call you back. I hung up and went to report to Wolfe, who was in his office reading a book about Roman history and looking pleased with himself. He listened to my update, grunted a few times, and then said, "So we have a portrait that may have been worth $20,000 to the right buyer, a fortune teller who may have facilitated the theft, and an art dealer who may have known about it. That's motive and opportunity. All we need now is proof." "And a murderer," I added. "That too," he agreed. "Find Gregory Ashford, interview him, and keep pressure on Delphine Mercier. People make mistakes when they feel scrutinized. What if she didn't do it? Then we'll eliminate her and move on. But until we do, she remains our primary suspect." I spent the rest of Thursday afternoon tracking down Gregory Ashford. He turned out to be a stockbroker who collected art on the side, the kind of man who made a lot of money and spent it on things that made him feel cultured. I found him at his office on Wall Street, a plush suite with mahogany furniture and abstract paintings on the walls that probably cost more than most people's houses. Ashford was in his 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. He listened to my introduction with barely concealed impatience. "I already told the police everything I know about Martin Fels," he said, "which is that he was a fraud and a liar, and I'm not sorry he's dead. Tell me about the painting you bought from him. The one you said was a fake." "It wasn't said. It was a fake. I paid $3,000 for what I thought was an original Fels landscape. Turned out it was a copy of a George Bellows painting. Same composition, same style, just with Martin's signature instead of Bellows's. When I confronted him, he claimed it was an homage, not a copy. Artistic interpretation, he called it. I called it fraud." "Did you sue?" "I was going to, but my lawyer said it would be hard to prove. Fels could claim artistic license, and a jury might believe him. So I decided to cut my losses and tell everyone in the art world that Martin Fels was a hack and a cheat." "Sounds like you had reason to hate him." "I did hate him, but I didn't kill him. I was in my apartment Friday night with my wife, watching television." "You can ask her." "I will," I assured him. "One more question. Did you know about the portrait Fels was painting for Isabel Crane?" "I'd heard about it. Why?" "Would you have been interested in buying it?" "From Martin Fels, not for a nickel. I learned my lesson the first time." I thanked him for his time and left. Ashford had motive, revenge and humiliation, but his alibi would be easy to check. A wife might lie for a husband, but it was worth confirming. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was past 6. Wolfe was in his chair, a bottle of beer at hand, and he looked at me expectantly as I entered. "Gregory Ashford," I said, taking my seat. "He hates Martin Fels, but he has an alibi, was home with his wife Friday night. We can verify, but it sounds solid." "Then we eliminate him," Wolfe said. "That leaves Delphine Mercier, Vincent Hardwick, Claudia Renshaw, and the mysterious collector. Or Isabel Crane. Possibly. But I'm inclined to doubt it. The evidence doesn't support her as a suspect." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes half closed. "The painting, Archie. Everything comes back to the painting. Someone wanted it badly enough to kill for it. Not just to steal it, but to make sure Martin Fels couldn't create anything else like it. That suggests jealousy, not just greed. Or it suggests a collector who doesn't like competition. If the painting was as good as everyone says, and if other collectors heard about it, the price would have gone up. Killing Fels and taking the painting eliminates both problems. Then we need to find the painting. It's evidence, and evidence leads to proof. Saul's working on it." The phone rang, and I answered. It was Inspector Kramer, and he sounded annoyed. "Goodwin, is Wolfe there?" He is. You want to talk to him? Put him on. I handed the phone to Wolfe, who took it with visible reluctance. He hated talking on the phone almost as much as he hated leaving the brownstone. Yes, Mr. Kramer. I could hear Kramer's voice through the receiver, loud, irritated, and moving at about 3 times normal speaking speed. Wolfe listened for a moment, then said, I am investigating a murder, which is a legitimate use of my professional skills. If you have evidence that contradicts my findings, I would be happy to hear it. More angry noise from Kramer. I do not interfere with police investigations, Mr. Kramer. I investigate when the police have stopped investigating. There is a difference. A pause. Yes, I'm aware of that. But I have a client, and I have an obligation to that client. If you'd like to discuss this in person, you're welcome to come to my office. Otherwise, I suggest we both continue our work and compare notes when we have results. He hung up without waiting for Kramer's response and looked at me. Kramer is upset that we're investigating. Shocking. He says the case is closed. Robbery gone wrong. File it and move on. And you disagree. I disagree with the word closed. A case is closed when the murderer is identified, arrested and convicted. Until then, it's merely paused. He finished his beer and stood. I'm going to the dining room. Fritz has prepared something involving duck, and I intend to enjoy it. Tomorrow you'll continue investigating. Find the painting, Archie. It's the key to everything. Friday morning started with a call from Saul Panzer. Archie, I've got a lead on the painting. A dealer in Brooklyn says someone tried to sell him a portrait yesterday. Description matches the one Martin Fels painted. He didn't buy it because he was suspicious about provenance, but he got a name. Let's hear it. Vincent Hardwick. I felt my pulse quicken. The sculptor? The one who lived downstairs from Martin Fels? That's him. The dealer says Hardwick brought in the portrait, claimed it was done by a friend who needed money, and offered to sell it for $2,000. The dealer thought it was too good a deal, figured it might be stolen, and sent Hardwick away. But he kept the name. Did the dealer describe the portrait? Woman, mid-30s, beautiful, dark hair, wearing a blue dress, sitting at a piano. The dealer said it was one of the best portraits he'd seen in years. Real skill, real emotion, worth a lot more than $2,000. Isabel Crane. It had to be. Good work, Saul. Can you get me the dealer's address? I want to talk to him myself. Already have it. I'll call it in to you. 10 minutes later, I was in a taxi heading to Brooklyn. The dealer, a man named Morris Stein, had a small shop in Williamsburg, the kind of place where serious collectors went to find hidden gems and where less serious people tried to unload stolen goods. Stein was in his 70s, with white hair, thick glasses, and the kind of suspicious expression that comes from 50 years of dealing with liars. You're the detective, he said as I entered. Saul called ahead, said you wanted to know about Vincent Hardwick. That's right. Tell me about yesterday. Not much to tell. Man comes in around 2 o'clock, says he's got a painting to sell. Shows me this portrait. Beautiful work, really exceptional. Woman at a piano. Looked like she was about to sing. The kind of painting that makes you stop and look. I asked him where he got it. He said a friend painted it. The friend needed money, and he was helping out. You believe him? Not for a second. The painting was too good. The story was too convenient, and Hardwick was too nervous. I've been in this business long enough to know when someone's trying to move stolen property. So I told him I wasn't interested, and sent him on his way. Did he say anything else? Just that if I changed my mind, I could find him in Greenwich Village. Gave me an address on Cornelia Street. And you didn't report this to the police? Stein shrugged. What was I going to tell them? A man tried to sell me a painting I didn't buy. I don't have the painting, I don't have proof it was stolen, and I don't have time to waste talking to cops who won't do anything anyway. I run a business, not a charity. I couldn't argue with that logic. I thanked Stein, got a detailed description of the painting to confirm it matched the portrait of Isabel Crane, and headed back to Manhattan. Vincent Hardwick had the painting. That meant Vincent Hardwick had killed Martin Fels. All I needed now was proof. I went straight to the building on Cornelia Street and knocked on Hardwick's door. No answer. I tried again, louder. Still nothing. Eugene Walsh appeared from his apartment downstairs. He's not here. Left about an hour ago with a suitcase. Looked like he was going somewhere. Did he say where? Nope. Just paid his rent for the month in cash, and said he'd be gone for a while. I felt a surge of frustration. If Hardwick had run, catching him would be harder, but if he'd run, it also meant he was guilty. I called Wolfe from a payphone on the corner. Hardwick has the painting. He tried to sell it in Brooklyn yesterday, and now he's disappeared. I need Saul to track him down. I'll call Saul immediately, Wolfe said. In the meantime, return here. We need to discuss strategy. I got back to the brownstone around 1, just as Wolfe was finishing lunch. He listened to my report, grunted a few times, and then said, "Hardwick is our murderer. The evidence is compelling. Motive, opportunity, possession of the stolen painting. But we need more than circumstantial evidence. We need confession or eyewitness testimony. Or the painting itself. If we can get the painting, we can prove he stole it. Then find him. Use Saul. Use whatever resources are necessary. But find him." Saul called back an hour later. "I've got him. Vincent Hardwick checked into a hotel in Newark, the Royal Arms, registered under his own name. Apparently he's not a very smart criminal. Or a very desperate one," I said. "I'm going to Newark. If Hardwick is still there, I'll bring him back." "Want backup?" "If I need backup to handle one scared sculptor, I should find a new job, but thanks." I took a train to Newark and found the Royal Arms, a shabby hotel near the train station that catered to people who needed a room and didn't care about amenities. The desk clerk confirmed that Vincent Hardwick was in room 307, and I went upstairs. I knocked on the door. "Hardwick, open up. I need to talk to you." Silence. "I know you have the painting. I know you tried to sell it in Brooklyn. And I know you killed Martin Fels. Open the door, or I call the police." More silence. Then finally, a voice. "I didn't kill him." "Then open the door and explain it to me. You're not making things better by running." A long pause. Then the door opened, and Vincent Hardwick stood there looking like a man who'd been awake for 3 days straight. His eyes were red, his hands were shaking, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd seen him on Wednesday. "I didn't kill him," he said again, "but I took the painting, and I've been trying to figure out what to do with it ever since." I pushed past him into the room. It was small, dingy, with a bed that looked like it had been through a war and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. On the bed was a large rectangular object, wrapped in brown paper and string. "That it?" "Yes." I moved toward the bed, but Hardwick stepped between me and the painting. "Wait. Before you look at it, you need to understand something. I didn't steal this painting for money. I stole it because—" He stopped, struggling to find words. "Because it was evidence." Evidence of what? That Martin Fels was a better artist than anyone realized, that he'd transcended everything he'd done before, and that if this painting got out into the world, everyone would finally understand what I'd been saying for years, that Martin was a genius. His voice cracked slightly. I hated him, but I also recognized what he could do. And this painting, you need to see it. He moved aside, and I walked to the bed. Carefully, I cut the string and pulled away the brown paper. The portrait of Isabel Crane was everything everyone had said, and more. She sat at a piano, her hands poised above the keys, her face turned slightly toward the viewer. But it wasn't just a likeness, it was a revelation. Felix had captured something essential about her, something beyond beauty or talent. He'd captured her soul, her loneliness, her hunger for something she couldn't name. It was the kind of painting that made you forget you were looking at canvas and paint. It made you feel like you were looking at a living person. I stared at it for a long moment, and finally understood why Vincent Hardwick had stolen it. "Martin painted this?" I asked. "Yes, it's the best thing he ever did. Maybe the best thing anyone's done in years, and I couldn't let it disappear into some collector's private collection where no one would ever see it. So I took it." "And you killed Martin to get it?" "No." The word came out like a shout. "No, I didn't kill Martin. He was already dead when I found him." "Then tell me what happened." Hardwick sat down on the edge of the bed, his face in his hands. "Friday night, around 10:30, I heard someone leaving Martin's studio. Footsteps on the stairs, the front door closing. I waited a few minutes, then went up to see if Martin was all right. The door was unlocked. I went in and found him on the floor, dead. There was blood everywhere, and on the easel was the painting." "And you took it?" "Not right away. First I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? Should I run? But then I looked at the painting, and I realized if I left it there, the police would log it as evidence, and it would disappear into some storage room for months or years. And if they ever released it, it would go to Isabel Crane, who'd probably sell it to some collector who'd lock it away. No one would ever see it. Martin's greatest work would be lost. So you stole it. I took it. I wrapped it up. I took it to my studio, and I hid it. Then I went to bed and pretended I didn't know anything. Saturday morning, when Walsh found the body, I acted surprised. I told the police I'd heard arguing the night before, which was true. But I didn't tell them I'd been upstairs, and I didn't tell them about the painting. Who did you hear arguing with Martin? I don't know. I couldn't hear clearly enough, but it was a man's voice, and it sounded angry. They argued for maybe 5 minutes, then it went quiet. About 20 minutes later, I heard someone leave. That's when I went upstairs. And you saw no one? No one. I looked at the painting again, trying to understand what had happened. Someone had argued with Martin Fels, killed him, and left. 20 minutes later, Vincent Hardwick had gone upstairs, found the body, and stolen the painting, which meant the killer hadn't taken it. Why didn't the killer take the painting? I asked. It's worth $20,000 according to some. I don't know. Maybe they panicked. Maybe they didn't know it was valuable. Or maybe, he stopped thinking. Maybe they didn't care about the painting. Maybe they killed Martin for some other reason. That was a possibility I hadn't considered. I'd been assuming the painting was the motive. But what if it wasn't? I called Wolfe from the hotel lobby and explained the situation. He listened in silence, then said, "Bring Hardwick and the painting back to New York. I need to examine both." You think he's telling the truth? I think he's telling a truth. Whether it's the complete truth remains to be seen. But if he didn't kill Martin Fels, then we need to find out who did. I brought Vincent Hardwick back to Manhattan and delivered him to the brownstone around 5 o'clock. Wolfe had him sit in the red leather chair, and for the next hour he questioned Hardwick relentlessly about every detail of Friday night. The timing, the voices, the sounds. What had Hardwick heard? Who could have been in the studio? Why had the killer left the painting? By the time Wolfe was satisfied, it was after 6. He sent Hardwick away with a warning not to leave town, then turned to me. "Archie, we've been approaching this case incorrectly. We assumed the painting was the motive, but if Hardwick is telling the truth, and I believe he is, then the killer didn't take the painting. That changes everything. So what was the motive? Revenge, humiliation, anger, the same motives that drive most murders. Martin Fels had many enemies. We need to determine which enemy killed him. And how do we do that? By gathering them all here and forcing the truth into the open." He looked at me with the expression he gets when he's about to do something theatrical. "Contact Jasper Kimball, Delphine Mercier, Claudia Renshaw, Isabel Crane, and Gregory Ashford. Tell them to be here tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Tell them I'm prepared to reveal who killed Martin Fels and that their presence is required. You know who did it? I have a theory. Tomorrow, we'll see if it's correct." Saturday, at 3 o'clock, the office was full. Jasper Kimball sat in the red leather chair, looking nervous and hopeful. Delphine Mercier stood near the bookshelves, her expression unreadable. Claudia Renshaw sat in one of the yellow chairs, her hands folded in her lap. Isabel Crane stood by the window, gazing out at West 35th Street. Gregory Ashford had declined to come, claiming he had better things to do, but the rest of them were present. In the hall I could hear the soft pad of paws as Caesar and Mars maintained their patrol. Loyal was stationed by the front door as always, and I knew Minerva and Diana were somewhere nearby. The Brownstones' guardians, watching over another gathering. Wolfe sat behind his desk, his fingers laced across his belly, his eyes moving from face to face. Finally, he spoke. "You are here because one of you is a murderer." The room went very still. Martin Fels died last Friday night, struck down by someone he knew and trusted. The police believe it was a robbery. I believe it was murder, and I intend to prove it. Delphine Mercier spoke first. "I thought you said you had proof, Mr. Wolfe. Was that a lie?" I said I had a theory. The proof will emerge from this conversation. He looked at each of them in turn. "Let me begin by eliminating those of you who didn't kill Martin Fels. Mr. Kimball, you have an alibi. You were at a gallery opening Friday night with 40 witnesses. Miss Renshaw, You were home alone with no alibi, but you lack motive. You'd moved on from Martin months ago. Miss Crane, you wanted the portrait, which means you wouldn't have risked its loss by killing the artist. Then that leaves me, Delphine said calmly. Are you accusing me, Mr. Wolfe? Not yet. First, let me explain what happened. Martin Fels was painting a portrait that he believed would make his career. He was correct. The portrait was extraordinary, a masterpiece that transcended his previous work. But Martin had a problem. He'd contracted to sell it to Miss Crane for $5,000, and then someone else offered him $20,000. He was tempted. He wanted the money, but he also valued his reputation, so he consulted you, Miss Mercier, and asked what he should do. I told him greed would be his undoing, Delphine said, and I was right. You were, but not for the reasons everyone assumed. You see, I believe the person who offered Martin $20,000 for the portrait was your partner, Roland DeWitt. DeWitt is an art dealer with access to wealthy collectors. He'd seen Martin's preliminary sketches. He knew the portrait would be valuable, and he wanted it. But Martin refused to sell. He honored his contract with Miss Crane, even though it cost him $15,000. That decision made him a rarity in the art world, an honest man, and it also made him dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Kimball asked. To you, Mr. Kimball. The gallery owner went pale. What are you talking about? You've been selling forged paintings, Mr. Kimball. Not many, and not often, just enough to supplement your income when times were difficult. Martin Fels discovered this 2 weeks ago. He'd seen a painting in your gallery that he recognized, one supposedly by George Bellows, but actually a copy. A very good copy, but still a copy. Martin confronted you, told you he'd go to the authorities unless you stopped, and you agreed. But you also realized that Martin knew your secret, and secrets are dangerous things. This is insane, Kimball said. I didn't kill Martin. No. But you wanted to, and when Delphine Mercier predicted that Martin would die, you saw an opportunity. If Martin died and the prediction was fulfilled, everyone would assume it was fate or coincidence. No one would suspect murder. So you went to Martin's studio Friday night. You argued with him. Vincent Hardwick heard the argument. And then you killed him with the sculpture stand. It was quick, brutal, and effective. I wasn't there, Kimball said desperately. I was at a gallery opening. 40 people saw me. 40 people saw you arrive at 8 o'clock and leave at 11. But Martin Fels died around 10:30. You left the opening, went to his studio, killed him and returned. No one noticed you were gone because gallery openings are chaotic. People come and go constantly. You can't prove that. I can prove you had motive. Martin Fels knew you were selling forgeries. That knowledge could have destroyed your career. And I can prove opportunity. You left the gallery opening at exactly the time Martin was killed. But most importantly, I can prove you made a mistake. What mistake? You left the painting. You killed Martin to protect your secret. But you didn't take the painting because you didn't want it. You wanted Martin dead, not his work. But that oversight means Vincent Hardwick found the painting, and now we have evidence that connects everything together. The portrait Martin refused to sell to Roland DeWitt. The secret you wanted to protect. The prediction Delphine made. All of it connects to you. Kimball stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. Sit down, Mr. Kimball. Wolfe's voice was hard as iron. Or I'll call Inspector Kramer and have him arrest you right now. Kimball sat, and I saw his hands shaking. The same hands that had held a sculpture stand and brought it down on Martin Fels's head. You hired me to investigate this murder, Wolfe continued. Not because you wanted justice, but because you wanted to control the narrative. You wanted to make sure the investigation focused on the robbery angle, on Delphine's prediction, on anything except you. But you made one critical error. You underestimated my ability to see the truth. Delphine Mercier spoke softly. I didn't predict Martin's death, did I? I predicted Jasper's betrayal, and it's happening right now. Kimball's face crumbled. I didn't mean to kill him. I went to his studio to talk to him, to convince him to keep quiet, but he refused. He said he wouldn't let me keep selling forged paintings to unsuspecting collectors. He said it was wrong, and I lost control. I picked up the sculpture stand, and I hit him, just once, but it was enough. The office was silent except for Kimball's ragged breathing. I didn't take the painting because I didn't care about it, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted Martin to stop talking. I wanted him to stop being so damned righteous. He was going to ruin everything I'd built, so I stopped him. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, call Inspector Kramer. Tell him we have his murderer. I reached for the phone, but before I could dial, Jasper Kimball stood and ran for the door. He made it into the hallway before Caesar and Mars intercepted him, 200 pounds of Doberman blocking his path, growling in harmony. Loyal appeared behind him, cutting off retreat, and Kimball froze. I wouldn't move if I were you, I said mildly. Caesar doesn't like people who run. Kimball stood very still, surrounded by dogs, until Inspector Kramer arrived 20 minutes later with 2 uniformed officers. They took Kimball away in handcuffs, and Kramer stayed behind to glare at Wolfe. You could have called me before staging this performance, he said. You could have investigated properly, Wolfe replied. But you didn't, so I did. Kramer grumbled something about private investigators interfering with police work, but he didn't argue further. He knew Wolfe was right. After everyone left, I poured Wolfe a beer and myself a glass of milk. That was impressive. How did you figure it out? The painting, Wolfe said. If the killer had wanted money, he would have taken the painting. If he'd wanted revenge for a personal slight, he might have destroyed it. But leaving it untouched meant the motive was something else, something that required Martin's death but not the destruction of his work. That suggested a secret, and once I considered what secrets Martin might have discovered, Kimball became the obvious suspect. And Delphine's prediction? A coincidence? Or perhaps she genuinely saw that Kimball was struggling with ethical choices and guessed that something would give. Either way, her prediction was accurate, but not supernatural. What about the $20,000? Was that real? Probably. Roland DeWitt likely did make an offer, but Martin refused it because he valued his integrity. That integrity cost him his life. I thought about that for a moment. So we solved the case. Kimball gets arrested for murder, and Delphine Mercier gets to keep claiming she predicted the whole thing. Everyone wins except Martin Fels. Martin Fels is dead. He doesn't care who wins. Wolfe finished his beer and set the glass down. But his portrait will survive. Vincent Hardwick will return it to Isabel Crane, and she'll have the memorial she commissioned. That's something. Yeah, I said, that's something. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through the bulletproof windows, and I could hear Fritz in the kitchen preparing dinner. Somewhere in the brownstone, 6 dogs maintained their patrol, keeping watch over a fortress where justice occasionally emerged from careful thinking and stubborn persistence. It had been a good week. We'd solved a murder, caught a killer, and proved once again that Nero Wolfe could unravel even the most complicated cases without ever leaving his chair. And for that we'd been paid $10,000. Not a bad day's work.